Welcome back to Citizens for Community Media. You'll see Dr. E. Michael Jones is here and Pastor Mario Sims. And we had to go back to the subject of South Bend's Mayor Peter Buttigieg because he is the talk of the town. He's the talk of the nation. And in fact, Mike was just saying that he was on Ellen DeGeneres just today, which is a big show. And so we're going to have to look at this again. And the scripture that keeps coming back to me is Romans 1:32. It says, "Who knowing the judgment of God, that they which commit such things are worthy of death, not only do the same, but have pleasure or approval in, or approve those who do such things, have pleasure in them that do them." Mario was just saying only 4% of the people out there are homosexuals. I've heard it a lot less, but...
Well, I gave them the benefit of the doubt. If I said 2.8 or 3%, then they'd say, no, it's 4%. So, or whatever. But it said less than 4%, but for the sake of conversation.
But 4%. This is, people watch Ellen DeGeneres. I can't stand watching that stuff, but they do watch it, and that means they're giving approval, and they're taking pleasure in this. And according to this, who knowing the judgment of God, that they which commit such things are worthy of death, not only do the same, but have pleasure in them that do them. Yeah. Well, this nation is being indicted, it seems. I mean...
Well, I think first, we talked about Pontius Pilate before we went on, when Jesus is standing there, and he asks him, what's truth? What you're seeing is people who are calling themselves Christians. There was an article that was sent to me today that showed Pete Buttigieg saying or questioning if Donald Trump was a Christian or if he believed in God. So I immediately uploaded a picture of him kissing his husband, because he considers himself a wife. These are his words. So, and then I said, well, President Trump is married to a woman, and here's a picture of Pete Buttigieg, who calls himself a wife, who's married to, or you have to be a wife if you call
the other fellow a husband.
A husband. I mean but so you have to first establish what is truth. Well, I think what's going on is they're creating an alternate truth. It's a truth, because the other thing, they'll attack the Bible. When I say they, I mean people who believe in homosexuality as a lifestyle. A lot of times you'll have them say, Jesus never said anything about homosexuality, and I laugh. I mean, it's just...
Worse than that. He would say things like, he says, your sins are so bad, Copernicum or whoever, your sins are so bad that the judgment on your sins is going to be even worse than on that of Sodom and Gomorrah. Right. And he was saying that for shock effect, because everybody assumed that was the outer edge.
Well, but I think that goes, that's kind of the strategy and the tactic that I see Pete Buttigieg using in his campaign. What's amazing to me, and I'm 66 years old, I've seen a lot of, I remember the boutique candidates of like Pat Paulson. Everybody knew it was a joke. He'd had his, the red, white, and blue hat on, and this Uncle Sam, and everybody knew it was a joke. But what Pete Buttigieg does and what he says, to me, is just, I don't understand how he could talk about his accomplishments. Because we live in South Bend, and we see okay, if you think putting disco lights on the river is an accomplishment, okay. If you think narrowing the streets and disrupting the traffic and spending over $25 million to do that, which everyone complains about, is an accomplishment, okay. But the reality, if you look at the pain index here, 42% black poverty, double-digit black unemployment, the lowest number of minority officers in the South Bend Police Department, it's laughable when he says that, he believes that he can get the black vote. I mean, this is a man who, I think when I read your review, one of the things he talked about is he's narcissistic. You cannot be in control of your faculties and make the type of statements that he makes and and believe that no one's going to subject that to truth. But he does repeatedly.
Well, you have an angle on it because you ran for mayor. You're from Chicago, and you've been following the Chicago election with the new mayor there. So you have a vantage point. Mike has a vantage point. Peter's dad moved into town within a year that you did.
Yeah.
3 houses away.
Yeah.
So your children, your younger children, probably about his age. I think the youngest, right?
I think Mike said one of his sons went to Harvard with him.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
well, there he
St. Joe High School, and they both went to Harvard.
But he was a lot older, the oldest son.
Right,
But
right.
your youngest were closer to his age. So you didn't see him playing. I mean, so you have an understanding that wants you to want to say something.
Right.
Well, this was one of the fictions in his autobiography. He was claiming to be a man of the people. He even said in the article in his book, he said, "I wonder what my neighbors would think of this." He's committed to this illusion that he's there with the people of South Bend. Well, I am his neighbor, as a matter of fact, and it's pretty clear what he thinks of what this neighbor thinks, because he called me a fringe activist. He wouldn't mention my name. He wouldn't mention the fact that my son went to Harvard, as he went to Harvard, because this is all an illusion. Now, what's the illusion based on? Well, you know, I'm a man of the people. I'm like those Polacks on the West Side. I eat pierogies on Dingus Day, as long as they stay in line. Now, when you get out of line, you stop being a Polak, and then you become a fringe activist. So the point here is he's playing toward the center, which he learned from, I think, from Bill Clinton. Hillary never learned this, but you stake out the extreme position, you're a homosexual, and then what you do is you play toward the center by talking about how normal you are. And the whole point of his book is how normal he is. You know what I mean? And so that's the illusion that he thinks is going to carry him into the White House. But so there's nothing there. Okay, we know there's nothing there. We walked in tonight. I hope you show this at some point. All those line bikes he took credit for.
Full of line bikes.
The warehouse is full of dead line bikes.
Yeah.
It's like the elephant's graveyard out there. This was one of his great accomplishments, and now that's all gone down the drain. But nobody on Colbert didn't ask him about the line bikes. Ellen DeGeneres didn't ask him about the line bikes. So what's going on here? Well, he is the pawn. He is the proxy warrior for a group of powerful people. The oligarchs. Let's just call them the oligarchs. He has spent his entire life trying to ingratiate himself with the oligarchs. That's why you go to Harvard.
Because he couldn't ingratiate himself with the neighborhood kids.
Well, he was isolated. He was the classic kitchen window child, the homosexual, isolated from the neighborhood, just watching life pass him by. Nobody knew about him on the block. Nobody knew about him until he came back. But he's got the greatest resume in human history. And he spent his entire tenure here in South Bend building his resume. He showed up. He was how long was he in office? Like 4 months. Suddenly he's gone.
Right.
Wait a minute. He went to Afghanistan.
Right.
I thought we elected you to be mayor. So let me get this straight. If you can go to Afghanistan for 9 months and the world doesn't end, then why do we need you? Well, that's not the point. The point is that Pete wanted to be a war hero. And the only war at the time was Afghanistan, so he went to Afghanistan because it's another notch on his resume. He was a Rhodes Scholar. What is the Rhodes? Who is that named after? Cecil Rhodes, the empire builder, the man who exploited black labor in Africa to build all those railroads, and then endowed a scholarship, a fellowship for people who were going to staff the British Empire, except that now it's called the American Empire, another oligarchic institution. So he is, I used the image before when Donald Trump came here. Donald Trump was the surfer, and the people of Indiana were the wave. And he rode the crest of that wave into the White House because those people realized that nobody represented them anymore. Everyone held them in contempt. Hillary Clinton called them deplorable. She wrote off the entire state of Indiana. because of the way she felt. She is in with the oligarchs. So was that a passing phase? Was that a momentary aberration? Well, yeah, I think that's what we're seeing right now. The oligarchs are betting that Trump was a blip, it was an anomaly, it was an aberration, and now we're going to get back to normal. But in order to get back to normal, we have to up the game, and now it's going to be a homosexual. A homosexual is going to represent oligarchic interests. So what do these people believe? What do these people believe? It's not just Pete. It's not about Pete. It's about the people who are backing Pete. He represents their interests. So what do they believe? Well, how about this? At the heart of liberty is the right to define one's own concept of existence, of meaning, of the universe, and of the mystery of human life. That is Justice Kennedy, that's Planned Parenthood versus Casey. This is a joke in the legal profession. It's called the Mystery Clause. Okay, it's a standing joke in the legal profession. Do you have the right to define existence? Well, actually, I think he does. I think he feels that he has the right to define existence, and he is now the theologian. Yeah. He is, as Mario pointed out, he's now commenting, taking inventory on other people's religions. And he's saying, basically, that Trump, he's not close to God like me. I'm close to God. Because I follow my own religion. In other words, I define my existence. And my existence, according to my religion, sodomy is a virtue. Now you don't follow your religion. You're a hypocrite. But I follow my religion because I have defined myself as a homosexual, and I have now defined my religion. Well, wait a minute. Who gave you the right to create your own religion? I thought God had something to do with your religion. So you're saying you have the power that usually is reserved to God to create this religion according to your principles. And you define your principles as conforming exactly to your behavior. So you're worshiping your own behavior. That's known as idolatry. But what that means is, okay, you have the right to do that. Well, then you have the right to say whatever you want, and that will be the way it is.
But not everybody can achieve that. I mean, he achieved it because he did get the perfect resume, and you didn't. You had a chance.
Right. So you can define yourself, and you can just say, well, my religion is the religion of Moses, and Deuteronomy said it's an abomination, and so does St. Paul. But you don't have the rich and the powerful backing you up. Yeah. This man does. This is the moment in history right now. This is what Hegel would call the zeitgeist. Yeah. Hegel was in Jena when Napoleon rode in after defeating the Prussian troops. And he said, this is the zeitgeist, the spirit of the times on horseback. Pete is the zeitgeist. This is the man that represents everything that the oligarchs hold sacred. If they can create this man and convince the people to vote for this non-entity that is nothing but David Axelrod, Pritzker money, and all the talk show hosts that money can buy, then they will have won Trump. They will prove that Trump was an aberration. The oligarchs will be back in power once again.
But their key is that he's been vetted by this conservative state of Indiana. He's been vetted by Notre Dame. Vetted by 80% of the South Bend voted for him.
I don't know if vetted. No. Well, let's look at before.
That's
Michael,
the image.
Let's distinguish the vetting by the voters. When he first came to office, in fact, the second time he came to office, he likes to claim that he got 80% of the vote. When in reality, he got 7% of the vote of those that turned out.
No, you got 7% of all of the registered voters.
All of the registered voters that came out.
Because only 11%, it's actually 8.8%.
Thank you.
Only 11% of the voters showed up.
Yeah.
This would not be a valid election in Bosnia. We said this before. Okay, so there's something that everyone accepts at face value until you look into it, and then it falls apart.
It's vaporous, but that is exactly when you talk about the zeitgeist. This is not something that's tangible. He destroyed 1,000 homes. His plan was to knock down 1,000, which he did. And then they said, okay, what comes next? He said, I don't know. Well, I think everybody understands properties. When you have properties, you generate revenue from taxes, and when you knock down 1,000 homes, you're gonna have to come up with something to replace these revenues. And now South Bend is in a precarious position in the next years to come. It's on a cliff. It's a cliff of financial doom.
Because in addition to tearing down those homes, he put the city in debt for the streets. And
yes.
all those other.
We still have $700 million we got to invest in sewers. That can has been kicked down the road. That's going to be inherited by the next mayor.
So it's all this illusion, and the point here is, are they going to succeed? I think this is what the bet is. They're betting. This money is betting that Trump was an aberration. The people did not wake up. The people do whatever we tell them. As long as we put this guy on the right talk shows, he will get elected. That's what it's going to come down to. Is there this consciousness out there, or is there not? And that's why this is important. And I think this is also, in a sense, why we are tied together here, aren't we? I mean, did you think when you started off in life that you would be the only person opposing the gay mayor in South Bend, Indiana?
You know, you have to understand, I met him at a church in October. The first time he ran for office, before he ran, I met with him. There was a meet and greet, and I had a chance to go up to him. And I have to tell you that when you meet him for the first time, he's very standoffish, and he is the kid in the kitchen window. That's what comes across when you use that term as a kid. He's not comfortable with adults, and you could tell that. So I had a chance. I met him in this church, and I said to him, South Bend has gone through so much that I'll support you if you're going to help the city, but I'm going to oppose you if you continue the pain and the hurt. Well, he immediately continued the pain and the hurt. Of course, he got then embroiled in 2012 in the tapes, the situation with the South Bend tapes. You have to understand, without going into detail, this is a situation where police officers were heard on recordings plotting crimes. The media tries to water it down by saying it was some racial slurs. In reality, there were crimes there were crimes that were being plotted. Well, to add insult to injury, the officers sued the city. And if you know anything about law, this is outrageous. Without proving damages, he authorized a payment of $500,000 to 4 officers and their wives. The content of the tape, he's fought from being disclosed while saying, hey, I really want them, to be, I'm not doing this. I'm not the one. When there's no legal impediment to the tapes being played as we sit here. But then you parallel that with this poor black family whose son was laying asleep in his bed at 3:10 in the morning in a few years ago on the poor side of South Bend. Police officers come without a warrant, tase this kid who's 17 years old asleep. You can't be more innocent. The kid had no criminal record, junior in high school. They came in, tased the kid, drug him out, left a taser prong in his side. He sues. Now keep in mind, Buttigieg pays $500,000 without any showing of damages to these 4 white officers and their wife, forces the kid to go to trial. The jury awards $1, a total of $18 for each of the counts. Now, contrast that with a $500,000 settlement within a few months of the officers suing. And this family, the Franklin family, being made to wait 2 or 3 years to go to trial. Juries in this is not Chicago or New York or L.A. where you have minorities on the jury. You may have one, minority on a jury. So you're getting a pro-police jury, which they know you're going to get a pro-police jury, and the jury awarded them $1. Basically, who's going to give money to these black people? I mean, we believe the officers. But he sees himself as a champion of black people. And then, of course, he has these paid minions. The clerk of South Bend, who he used as a beard during the first election, if you remember, he ran with her to make it look like, he has this woman. If you didn't know, it looks like that's his wife or someone. He used her as a beard. She gets a $20,000 raise or some huge raise. And of course, and that's just been, that has been the battle plan here to get the black vote. It reminds me of the Negro in America, which was written in 1946. It plays out the same way, where you have the person that's in control, the white person that's in control of the city goes and gets a beautician and a black pastor and barber. He pays them, and they go tell the community everything is okay. He's taking a page out of that book. This is insane. I mean, it's.
But like Mike said,
on so many levels.
You were the only one that opposed. Well, Graylin Watson said, we've had other people, but
a handful of pastors, a handful,
and nobody at Notre Dame said anything.
Yeah, 500 or 600 churches here, and you have a handful of pastors, a handful of pastors to stand up.
I got called a racist for doing it.
Yeah.
All those black faces behind.
Surrounded by black pastors. We ought to have that picture up.
The racist. Why did you have the racist?
Well,
I mean, the other instance is, okay, you're a man of the people. Do you represent the people of South Bend? Well, the people of South Bend, by and large, oppose abortion. They drove the abortion clinic out of business here. We didn't have one here. And then suddenly the abortion forces come from out of town. They're not part of South Bend. They come from out of town. They want to establish a clinic. Well, to do this clinic, they need some type of zoning variance. Well, the council turns them down. Now, that's the representatives of the people, isn't it? They turned them down. And so what does our man of the people mayor do? He overrules the ruling of the council. Well, whose interest are you representing here? That has nothing to do with South Bend. The people of South Bend didn't like it. The council didn't like it. And you overruled both of them. And no one's talking about this. No one's talking about the fact that this may give some indication that you don't represent the people here. So the point here is, maybe you have the best resume in the world. Maybe you're the smartest guy in the room in every building in Indiana. But you don't represent the people here. And they know that.
Do you think he's a lot like his dad? Is that, the Bible says it says like mother like daughter, but Jesus said, if you see me, you see the Father. So there is
he has a very ambivalent relationship to his father. Okay, we know that the cause of homosexuality is father deprivation. That everybody knows that. They try and cook up gene theories to distract from that fact. But there were people like the late Joe Nicolosi, who had something called reparative therapy, where he could act on it and actually get, in other words, the therapist becomes the surrogate father in a sense, and because of that, the man, the homosexual, finds the affirmation from a male, non-sexualized affirmation that he did not find from his father, and it heals him. That was so successful they had to ban it in the state of California. It's illegal to do that in the state of California. So on the one hand, you've got a guy who's a homosexual, which means he has father problems. On the other hand, his father probably taught him everything he needed to know about how to subvert institutions from the inside, because his father was the expert on Antonio Gramsci, the Italian Marxist who basically came up with the idea of how to march through the institutions. So you got this weird kind of ambivalent relationship going on here as a way of constantly distracting you from the fact that you don't represent the people here.
But what he does, though, is he brilliantly uses taxpayer money to buy supporters. You look at it, and again, and this isn't even an issue of race. This is an issue of the oligarchs. But they play this chess game so well that you could never. So what they do is they go out and they buy. It's always amazing to see some of the black people called social activists or community activists, and they're funded by the city or one of the city funded organizations. And the question is, well, how can you be a community activist when you're paid by the city? Well, those are the people that will stand up and say, hey, he's doing a great job. And, you do a double take. Wait a second. Your organization is funded by the city. The mayor decides to call you a community activist, but you're on his payroll. And every time he needs, to have support, then he rallies this group of ministers that have been paid. You find out behind the scenes he's paid $500,000 so he can have a housing development in some demolished pile of, building 2 homes in a neighborhood. There's 50 vacant lots that's never going to come to anything. No one's going to buy them. No one's going to invest. So it's this amazing ability to pad a resume. What he's doing is he's not trying to help a demographic. What he's done is play this game of building his resume. I mean, if you look at the 8 years he's been in South Bend, you talked about, going to Afghanistan. I'm a veteran, and you look at the guy and you go, I mean, he went to Afghanistan, and then we don't hear about him serving as a reserve officer anymore. Typically, reserve officers every year, go on active duty during the summer. So you go and, well, why was it just one time that the whole thing is he's padding a resume, he's building a resume, but there's no substance there. I mean, this is just a facade.
The average American doesn't require substance for some reason. And
wait a minute. What we saw was a change in consciousness here.
Yeah.
I mean, no matter how disappointed we all are in Donald Trump, that was a manifestation of a change of consciousness. He was an outsider. He never should have been elected because of just his background. What qualifications did he have? He didn't go to Harvard, blah, 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 the whole thing. And so now we're coming back with this guy to restore the status quo ante.
Wasn't that how it always works? We voted in, let's say, Clinton. Then there's a reaction to go to Bush. Then you get sick of Bush, and then so we go.
No, I think it's deeper than that. Because I'm thinking, what did we learn here? What happened over this past 2 years is that all of these institutions discredited themselves. Does fake news, is that something we talk about now? I mean, whether it's true or not in this particular instance, that's become a concept. And so now that you look back on it, you're thinking, well, what about all of those times I saw these people like Anderson Cooper talking about how Assad was bombing his own people? It turns out that was all made up. You made that up. And then suddenly you see that the narrative is starting to crumble here. It doesn't have the purchase on the mind. So the question is, this is like the experiment right now. Is that consciousness going to stay there? Is it there in spite of Donald Trump? I mean, Donald Trump, as I said, was the surfer who rode on that wave, but is the wave there? Is that consciousness there? Are we going to go back to pretending that, I don't know, a lone deranged gunman killed John F. Kennedy? Yeah. I mean, Walter Cronkite, did you believe? I believed it when I saw Walter Cronkite say that. Yeah. Well, are we going to go back to pretend that Walter Cronkite's there, that Anderson Cooper is Walter Cronkite? I don't think so. Yeah. I don't think we can go back. I think that this is part of what happens when you learn something. You don't unlearn it. And that's going to be, so I think this is why this is an important battle, because this is the movement of history. We have all been brought together at this moment in history, and we are tied together. Whether I'm sure he doesn't like that. I don't like it. He doesn't like it. But the fact of the matter is, from all eternity, there was a divine plan that had put Pete as the representative of the decadent state of the American empire at this particular period of time. And then who else is there? Who's going to stand up? Well, where are they? At least somebody stood up, The question is, it's not so much a question of human intention here. It's more of a question of the forces that I described here that got Kennedy to write that ridiculous statement, of people who believe that truth is the opinion of the powerful, that that justice is the opinion of the powerful, that if you have money, you can take a sow's ear and turn it into a silk purse, and nobody will know the difference. And that's what this campaign is all about.
That's exactly.
There's nothing there.
Right.
There's nothing there. It's like a warehouse full of abandoned Lime bikes.
That
That's what South Bend
know
is.
about. Yeah, they don't.
Nobody
know
knows about a warehouse full of abandoned Lime bikes. We're going to pretend that it doesn't exist. There's nothing there. But the oligarchs like this because if there's nothing there, this shows you how powerful they are.
Well, there's another shoe that's involved in it, I think, also because the Book of Esther. I mean, when the queen, is comfortable in the palace and her relative comes and says, hey, you need to go to, and she goes, he goes, for such a time as this, that's us. So much pressure. Okay, now there's monetary pressure where we just won't fund you. That's what goes on in South Bend, that our church is 50,000 square feet. We could easily house the homeless. Well, we've been prevented from doing that simply because I oppose when the mayor came out. We stood next to you, and when the Oberfeld ruling came down and said this is wrong, we're standing against this. We're standing the truth of the Bible. That is what we decide truth is, not situational truth, but this is truth, and we're going to stand there. We're going to stand at the wall, and we're going to say that. So he deals with that two ways. First, he starves anyone for cash. Well, you won't get funded here, if So, and then what they do is they threaten violence. And we've had, Antifa and homosexual activists, threaten the church. Fortunately, I'm a veteran. We had veterans say, no, if you do, you got to deal with us. And we made complaints to law enforcement. But I think, Mike and Peter, what you have to understand, this isn't just, he's creating an illusion and there's nothing there. This is also, he's creating an illusion with the help of a fawning media who will only cover, don't worry, be happy stories about him. In the face of the reality of South Bend, the ruinous state that his 8 years of leadership has left South Bend in, which is visible. If you drive through, you're weaving through potholes and 1,000 lots looking like a snaggletooth face here. And but then you have him buying out voices of opposition. And now he's taking the high ground by saying, I define Christianity. This is, it's not, it's...
This is what we can anticipate in the future.
Yes.
Because if you have the power to define what Christianity is, or you have the power to define what is right and what is wrong, and who is good with God and who is not, then you're going to use that power if it's increased.
Sure.
And you will see that now we can't object.
Well, don't you think Walter Cronkite trying to create the impression that Lee Harvey Oswald was the sole gunman, that achieves so much.
Right.
But if they can create the impression that sodomy is a virtue almost, what do the enemies of Christ achieve by that? Yeah. Don't they get more for that than just, getting you to believe that Lee Harvey Oswald shot Kennedy?
Well, yeah, he's up the ante, but nothing stays. I mean, there's been a preparation for this,
yes.
And the preparation has been contraception. Yeah. Let's face it, fellas. If you think that you can separate procreation from the sexual act, then how can you object to a homosexual doing what he does? You've already, and if you allow that to happen, you're suddenly now in a bind. You're in a prison of your own making.
Well, growing up, when your parents, 5% are virgins when they get married now, right? But when your grandparents got married, could have been the other way around. It could have been 5% were not virgins.
Well, it was. I grew up on the west side of Chicago, and it was a shame to have a young girl pregnant in high school.
Oh.
I mean, this is in the 60s.
Very big.
Families would be embarrassed by this. And now you see a mayor in Buttigieg kissing his husband. And see, so what's well, if you remember, Satan's first attack was against the family. Okay, so this is a continuation. It's a very subliminal message being sent that the family unit is no more the man and the woman, and morality is established by the Bible. It's now, established by the homosexual, who tells you that it's virtuous now, that we're the ones that are abnormal, that what we're saying is hateful. It's hate speech.
Well, aren't they learning this? Okay, Notre Dame, a while back, I don't know how long ago, 10 years ago, 7 years ago, they had Gay Day, and they had T-shirts, and I think it was 1,500 of the students had the T-shirt that says "Gay, fine by me." Now they have this big thing on the leggings, right?
Right. The woman writes a letter about the leggings.
Okay, but this is all an expression that you don't hold marriage sacred.
Well, it goes back to what Mike
what is
was
it?
saying. It goes back to what he was saying, that what they've done is what Kennedy said. I mean, now it's, it's the high calling of man to determine, you're the captain of your ship. Essentially, it's I decide.
But yeah, you're free to fornicate.
But this is what it's going to come down to. Okay, is there a logos to the human body?
Yes.
Or not? Yes or no? Or do you get to determine the meaning of the human body? In other words, do you get to determine in your arbitrary way? Is there a logos? Is there a plan there? Or is there not a plan there? So what they're saying is they lure you in because they know you have your own unruly desires. And they say, well, if you vote for me, you will be able to act on your own unruly desires, and I will ensure that you don't feel guilty about it because we'll surround you with other people who are just like you. And so you say, okay, and then they lure you in, and then suddenly you can't object anymore because there's no basis. You just abandon the basis here of objection. The basis of objecting about right and wrong is called the moral law. You said, okay, I'm going to abandon that because I want to do what I want to do, and you will give me government certification that I'm allowed to do that. Well, that means you can't ask for a raise now, okay, because there's no such thing as justice in the workplace, and there's no such thing as fair treatment, economic treatment, because you gave that up back then. So you were lured into a trap here. That is the whole point here. We'll get back to the whole point here is there a logos to the body? Does the body have a design? Mm-hmm. Are there sex organs? Is the anus a sex organ? Yes or no?
No.
Yes or no? Was that the design? Well, you're saying you have total hegemony over the body, and you can say that a dog has 5 legs. You can specify because you have these godlike powers. Now, if you have godlike powers of the time you're talking about, what am I supposed to do? I can't disagree with someone who's God, because that's what you're claiming you are. And so this is a prelude. You better get used to it, because the more these people get into office, the more they're going to go after the people that they feel threaten them, and that's people like the 3 of us.
Don't you think that this has been getting this way? We didn't wake up to this. These principles that, in my mind, we were subjects to the king. Oh, no, we're citizens. Well, what does that mean? Well, the government's our servant. Oh, okay, so the government's your servant. Okay. Tell me more about this.
It didn't happen overnight.
Right.
I'm saying that the moment of history right now is the culmination of things like this, like Kennedy's statement. You can go back and back and back, but this is the moment right now where they are going to try and make this normative. Now, sociological principle is that deviance is constant. That's not going to change. There is always going to be something that is considered deviant. The only question is, what's going to be considered deviant? So I have a friend who called me from Michigan who was involved in marijuana legalization. And he complained to me over the phone about how the state troopers always used to stop his car and see if he had drugs in his car. And he felt that this was persecution on his part. And now he said, no, nobody does that anymore. I don't get stopped anymore. Well, the reason you don't get stopped anymore is because you worked to elect the state attorney general, who happens to be a lesbian. So does the lesbian feel threatened by marijuana? What does Pete feel threatened by? When Trump showed up here, Pete said it was a threat to public order. I was there. It was no threat to public order. Where was the threat? The threat was to Pete's guilty conscience, because these were the people who supported RFRA, which is the worst thing that ever happened in the universe, according to people like Pete Buttigieg. RFRA was the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, was supported by the people of Indiana. It was supported by the legislatures, and it was the oligarchs who came in and basically told them they have to overturn their law. That's what Pete believes in. He believes that the people like him, people who have been anointed by the oligarchs, can simply overturn what the people want. This is not representative government. This is the tip of the iceberg here, because representative government is at stake here. It's a question of, Pete, we know you can't get elected anywhere in the state of Indiana. You could not become dog catcher in Kokomo. That's why you have to go to the illusion machine that the oligarchs have created to make something out of nothing. That's why you're running for president. And the fact is, that's your narcissistic fantasy, okay? But you have David Axelrod supporting your narcissistic fantasy, because they know that they can control you as much as they control everybody else.
Well, they control the people because the people worship his resume. They go, I went to Harvard. They worship. They're trained to worship that resume.
I think what happens is it's like, I don't, when you say the people, I don't think it's because homosexuals are less than 4%.
No, but people,
Okay.
What parent is going to, most parents are going to be so proud, my son got into Harvard. Oh, where did your son get in? Is this kind of...
What I'm saying is this, if you have a town hall meeting and you carefully screen your town hall members that come in, so you got 3,000 people and you bring in Pete, and because there was an article about them clapping so much they had to be asked not to clap, and they start snapping their fingers. So what you have is you have this carefully groomed media campaign that looks like it's a populist campaign, but it's all illusionary.
You have to give the illusion of popular support.
Right. That's what this is.
You have to give that illusion.
Exactly.
So the successful candidate is the one who gets the illusion of popular support.
Exactly.
But when he gets into office, he does the bidding of the oligarchs.
Exactly.
That's
exactly
the corruption of the American system.
That is
the problem with the American system right now.
And it's not even the issue. You know, I used the numbers with race to make a point. You know, as Christians, we believe, you know, all men came from one man. You know, Paul talks about that in Acts. So, but what they do is they can, you know, at one point, the vehicle that the oligarchs drove was the blacks during the civil rights period. Okay, well, how did that turn out for you? You know what I'm saying? I mean, well, that doesn't work. So you see black people essentially in a trash bin, and that dog won't hunt anymore. So we need a new vehicle. The homosexuals are that vehicle. And I think a lot of blacks are misled into, they're kind of co-opted, not realizing that Black Lives Matter. If you look at the leadership, they're homosexuals.
Lesbian, yeah.
It's not, you know, it's like...
Name took him in very...
Yeah. Yeah, so what you're seeing is very cunning use of media faces. You've got black women, well, they're black people, rallying around Black Lives Matter, but in reality, they're developing power and acceptance for lesbians to lead organizations. And not men, but lesbians. See, this is an attack against the family. As Christians, we have to sound the alarm. Hey, this is an attack against the family. This is Satan. He's not going to show up in a red suit and a pitchfork, folks. Don't allow yourselves to believe that Pete Buttigieg can now decide what religion is, can now decide that he is the champion of civil rights, because he's done nothing for black people here. He's done nothing for poor white people here.
Where do you think they're coming from, like survival of the fittest? What do you think where are they really coming from? They can do whatever it takes to win? Whatever trickery
Well, you spread money around.
It helps us win.
If you go like to the what is gender ideology? What does that mean? This now we're getting to Pete's father's background in promoting this type of stuff at Notre Dame. What would Foucault say?
Exactly.
Foucault would say that sexuality is a social construct. It's a construct. It's a man-made construct, and if man made it, then he can change it. And that's the whole point. And the culmination of this is gender reassignment surgery, where you have the illusion, okay, these people have these ideas, and there's a whole group of people out there who are willing to use them to feed their fantasies because they will profit from them at their expense, at these poor people's expense.
Exactly.
So you have people being mutilated, being shot up with hormones that are going to make them sick, all because we need to give the illusion that we are completely sovereign over creation. That's what's behind that thing. This illusion that somehow we are in charge. Well, who's we? Who's we? You mean the rich and powerful are in charge. Because if you have these delusions that they don't back you up, well, you're nobody. You're not going to go anywhere. And so the point here is that the fact that everyone is taking him seriously means that he's nothing. It means this is a test of the power of the oligarchs. Is that illusion machine still working? Was Trump an aberration? Can we still crank it out and if we can get people to believe this, they will believe anything. They will believe that John F. Kennedy was shot by a lone deranged gunman. They'll believe that the building number 7 collapsed because of whatever. They will believe anything because you are so alienated. Now, what is driving this? What is driving this? It is the people's deviation from the moral law.
Right, because 1973 is when they changed the mental illness category on homosexuality.
Right.
But you talk to somebody, let's say 1960, nobody doubted that there was a mental illness. You would have got out in the street, you probably had 90% of the people, well, of course it's a mental illness. What else?
In mainstream society at all. I grew up in the West Side and wasn't accepted, in the black community
because it was a mental illness.
This is the point here. This has been one of their greatest triumphs, to convince people that perversion is normal.
Yes.
That is the whole point of the Pete campaign. And if they can make him president, they will have won. They will consider that they have won.
And all he's doing, he's desperately trying to act normal.
Well,
just because you act normal.
Here's the thing: the campaign slogan should be "The lie is the truth." That's
1984.
Yeah, the lie is the truth, and that's what we're seeing playing out here.
Well, they'll call evil good.
Yeah,
is sodomy evil?
Right. Well, of course.
Is it evil?
According to
yes,
yes, it is evil.
According to our moral compass, which is what? The Bible. It's evil.
According to the nature of the human body,
yeah.
It contradicts the nature of the human body.
Well, think about this, Mike. I mean, let me put this on the table. If we follow his thinking that homosexuality is normal and good, I mean, does he understand that if that was allowed to just grow, that we would cease to exist as humans? Anal sex will not produce life. I mean, does anyone ever think about the end game here?
Well, he's just saying it's only going to be 5-10%, the other 90%.
But everyone has to go along with it.
Yeah.
And the more power he has, the more he will force people to go along with it. Yeah. So you'll have, I've told the story about the guy who walks up to me on the street, and says, "Excuse me, sir, did you say homosexual?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, I'm offended by that, I said, "Well, let me tell you something. I'm offended by the fact that you're interfering with a private conversation here. You're eavesdropping on a private conversation." If that happened in South Bend when nobody knew him, think of what's going to happen. Think of the intrusion into your life that these people will feel compelled to do, compelled to enforce on you. This is what's happening in Michigan now. They're going after hate groups. Well, what's a hate group? It's someone you don't like.
Well, to tell somebody you're going to go to hell if you don't repent of sodomy, they're definitely going to call that torture. He's torturing me.
So prepare yourself for more and more interference in your life. Because that's what these people do. Because they're driven. This man, why did this man come up to me and say this to me on the street? Why was he listening into my conversation? Well, because of his guilty conscience.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The guilty flee where none pursueth.
Yeah. Well, you inflicted pain on him. And
he was looking for it. He was looking to find something. He felt emboldened because we have a gay rights ordinance here in town. You know, he felt emboldened now, and I can act on my feelings in a way I couldn't before.
Well, that's what's going to happen.
Get used to it.
But you know, I'm glad you mentioned the gay rights ordinance, because we stood and we remonstrated, and I remember making the comment. They were saying the need for this ordinance, and if you look at most of the homosexuals, they're better educated and have higher salaries than most of the people in South Bend, and they're arguing for equality. And so I made the point in the 60s, you know, as a young black man, if you go in the South, you couldn't try on a hat or shoes. You know, that was true discrimination. No one is preventing a homosexual from trying a hat on or shoes or denying them an opportunity to buy a home or anything, because they, in fact, the advocates, many of them were professors at St. Mary's, and I mean, they make these arguments that, upon closer examination, are just nonsensical.
There's a whole story there. Why were representatives from the two Catholic colleges here testifying in favor of sodomy?
Yeah.
Because they had taken over those institutions.
Absolutely.
Because people like Buttigieg taught them how to do this by teaching them Gramsci, by interpreting Gramsci for them. So this is the tradition that they come from. This is the prelude to something that a road you don't want to go down.
And we're going down.
You don't want to go down it. Well, we don't know whether we're going down it, because we don't know whether there is this consciousness that's going to stick or not.
The consciousness that can overcome their sorcery.
Well, because it's all the recent tour that Pete Buttigieg has on all the mainstream media shows would lead you to believe that he's riding a wave of popularity, that he's now surfing.
Yeah, they can get you to believe that that's happening.
Well, but I mean, is that really true? See, we don't know. It's illusionary.
What happens, what this does, it explains to you, suddenly I understand why these people are there. I know why we have a Stephen Colbert. I know why we have an Ellen DeGeneres.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because they are there to tell us what to think.
There we go.
And they are tell us what to buy, and they tell us who to vote for.
And what's cool, and what's acceptable.
And so these are the people that control the discourse and control your mind for you if you turn on the television.
Well, 1776 was about self-government, right? And people are saying, I don't want to govern myself. I can't govern myself. Somebody help me. And Ellen DeGeneres,
of course,
I'll help you. I mean, self-government has failed because
we have no constitution that functions in the absence of a moral people. That's what John Adams said. So if you're incapable of self-control, then you're incapable of living in a democracy. And the essence of absence of self-control is sodomy. It's gone beyond the bounds of nature. Nature is not holding you in check anymore, and their behavior indicates this rebellion against nature. It becomes obsessive, becomes compulsive, and ultimately becomes something that kills them.
Well, that's what Chris Hedges, isn't that the fellow that Chris Hedges, he goes around, he wrote a book, but he's pointing out Americans are so corrupt. I mean, the opioid crisis, I mean, they're not governing themselves, bottom line. So the experiment in self-government, just on the practical, they're not.
Well, the question is, how's it going to turn out this time? How's it going to turn out this time? Is it going to go back in favor of the oligarchs? Is it going to go back in favor of their control? Are they going to try, because they are losing the battle over discourse, and the proof of this is the fact that they have to censor your YouTube channel.
Absolutely.
You just got censored today. I think.
Just got censored again
YouTube,
today.
Facebook, my scriptural posts against homosexuality, Bible without comment, have been censored several times. So what happens is you have this platform And of course, Buttigieg went to college with the owner of Facebook. And if you stop and think about this, you look at who owns the Washington Post, and they essentially have gotten to a point, they control a lot of the media. So that's not enough to control it. They now censor the voice of opposition and censor Christians and call Christians hateful when we stand up and say what the Bible says.
We're trying to warn them, don't go over the cliff.
Yeah.
You're gonna, if you keep going, you'll perish in hell.
Yeah.
But it's a sign they're losing, that their narrative is failing.
Well, as long as there are 3 men who are willing to stand up and speak the truth of the Bible.
Because that will mean that it's not a question of normal power.
Right.
Because how could we presume to challenge someone who can get on every single mainstream media talk show? I mean, who do we think we are?
Well, don't you think is it Hans Christian Andersen who wrote the King That Had No Clothes?
The emperor's, yes. The emperor's new clothes.
I mean, tell that story. Tell that story. So you know it.
Yeah. Yeah, basically the emperor was infatuated with getting new clothes, and so people came up, 2 tailors came up, and they said, we have something that no one has ever seen before. This is a fabric that only the wisest people in the world can see, and if you're not wise, you can't see it. Well, then they just held up nothing, and well, no one wants to think they're stupid. So they said, oh yeah, it's beautiful, and so finally he gets the fabric, puts it on, walks out, he's completely naked, and the kid says, but he doesn't have anything on. Well, that's the moment. I mean, we're now seeing the oligarchs are basically naked.
Yeah.
We're seeing the oligarchs naked. We know who's behind the curtain. We know the man behind the curtain. The question is, do we have the ability to act on that? Or do we want to go back and lock ourselves in our cells every night?
Well, God requires that we do, Mike. You know that.
So even if we fail, we have to do it.
We have to do it.
And if the 3 of us do succeed, it's not going to be because we have anything special.
Right.
It's because the power of the truth is more powerful than all their lies.
Yeah.
That's the point.
Yeah.
And so at that point, it's a contest. Who's going to win here?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like the counter. If they ate the fruit on the tree, they become wise.
Right.
If you believe the king has clothes on when he doesn't, you'll be wise.
Right.
I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, it is. But we have to call it ridiculous, and we have to not only call it ridiculous from an emotional setting, but we have to place the facts before the people to force them to think. The king has no clothes on. I mean, that's just the reality with Buttigieg. There's nothing there.
So we stood up when he came out of the closet.
Right.
We stood up. No one can ever change that fact.
Right.
That we stood there and we warned everyone. And
Right.
even though we didn't understand it completely, we were there saying there's something bad.
And
now we
together.
understand.
We came together as unified as the body, not blacks or whites or anything. We stood together. I think Mike is letting you know we're wrapping it up.
This is Dr. E. Michael Jones, Pastor Mario Sims with Peter Helland on the show Community Citizens for Community Media.
God bless you.